Ani, Koholamansi, Sego, hello, bonjour, welcome. My name is Jody Lynn Wadalove. I'm legal counsel with the Independent Street Checks Review. And I'm here tonight to serve as the facilitator for tonight's public meeting. Tonight is our 8th public session. It's the 8 out of 12 sessions that we'll be hosting across this province. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory upon which we are gathered here tonight. If you don't know, this territory is the traditional territory of different First Nations, the Anishinaabeg, or in English, Ojibwe, the Haudenosaunee, or in English, the Iroquois, and the Huron-Wendat. By recognizing the traditional territory of the First Nations peoples of this country, we're respecting and acknowledging their contributions, their presence, and their ongoing future in this country. This land is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, and as Canada moves forward, it's important that we not only learn and acknowledge this history, but that we repeat it for younger generations. So I'm here tonight to introduce the Honourable Justice Michael Tulloch, who is a judge from the Court of Appeal, which for those who are not in the legal profession is the highest court in this province. Justice Tulloch was appointed in June of 2017 to be the independent reviewer for the Independent Street Checks Review. Prior to this appointment, Justice Tulloch was the independent reviewer for the Independent Police Oversight Review. So during our meeting tonight, Justice Tulloch, it's important to understand that Justice Tulloch and our team and the work that we are doing is independent of police and of government. And tonight we're here to hear from you, the community here in Markham, about your thoughts on street checks and the related interactions with police. But before we get any further in our tonight's program, I'm going to introduce the Honourable Justice Tulloch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jodalyn. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mayor, and Police Services Board members that are here, as well as all the other citizens of Markham. I want to thank you and welcome you to this evening's session. As indicated by my counsel, Jodalyn, I'm here this evening in the capacity of an independent reviewer of the new regulation passed by the Ontario government in 2016, which was put in place to regulate the police practice of street checks, and more specifically, it was intended to limit or ban the arbitrary interaction of police officers' interaction with members of the public for the sole purpose of collecting their personal identifying information. Now, I am an independent reviewer, which means my position is independent of the government, as well as independent of the police, as indicated by Jodalyn. I will be reviewing the content of the regulation to see whether it reflects the important goal of ensuring bias-free police community interactions, as well that police and public interactions are consistent and conducted in a way that promotes public trust and confidence, while at the same time respecting individual rights and civil liberties. I will also be reviewing the regulation with a view to determine whether or not police services, the chiefs of police, as well as police services boards are in compliance with the terms of the regulation and are following it. Now, I will be conducting a very comprehensive review of this regulation. And in order to do so, I put together a team of experts, lawyers, and other experts to assist me in this regard, some of whom are here this evening. Just as a background, I want you to know that since September, we have been engaged in a very extensive consultation process throughout the province. And as Jodalyn has indicated, we have now embarked on our public consultations. Tonight's consultation marks the 8th of 12 public consultations throughout the province of Ontario. We have another 4 left We'll be going to, over the next couple of weeks, we'll be going to Sudbury, Ottawa, Windsor, and London. Now, I intend to draw on what I have learned and what I am learning from these consultations to formulate a report with recommendations which will be submitted to the Ontario government no later than November the 30th, 2018. And as I understand it, from the terms of reference of the mandate that was given, the government will then be obliged to release this report no later than January the 1st, 2019. Now, as indicated, by way of background, the regulation is intended to govern the police-public interactions. And it is triggered when the police is seeking to obtain a person's identifying information in situations where there is not a legal statutory obligation which obliges the citizen to provide the names or their names or identification to the police. And situations of that are, for example, stops under the Highway Traffic Act. If you're stopped by a police for a Highway Traffic Act infraction, you're obliged to provide your identifying information, your driver's license, and any other, like ownership of the, and insurance if requested, to do so. If you're trespassing in private property, the police have a right to ask you for your personal information, and you're also obliged to provide it. If you're being arrested for any kind of criminal offense, the common law requires, as well as the criminal code, that you provide your personal information to the police. Right now, in situations where the police don't have reasonable and probable grounds to arrest you, and there's no statutory legal authority to compel you to provide your personal identifying information, the police may ask you for your information in an interaction, in a conversation. In those circumstances, the regulation are triggered, and you're not obliged to provide your personal information unless you want to do so. Now, the regulation outlines what an officer must do if, in those circumstances, they ask for your identification. Now, the regulation is not intended to stop the police from speaking with the public, nor the public from speaking with the police. The regulation is intended to stop the police from randomly and arbitrarily collecting personal information from members of the public who they speak with. The regulation also provides information and guidelines on the storage of these information. As well, it provides the mandatory training for police officers on the new rules. It also provides for the development of policies and procedures by police services as well as police services boards. And it also outlines the procedures for the public reporting requirements by police services on the collection of personal identifying information. Now, with that background in mind, I look forward to this evening's conversation. I ask that you, be candid and feel free to discuss the issues with your table. I'm going to, defer to Prasna, who will set out for you the procedures of tonight's consultation. But I just want to emphasize at this juncture that, whatever you say will be taken very seriously by me and will be considered in my deliberations and the report that I will be writing. And your concerns Your insights, your suggestions will be reflected in the report. So again, I thank you. I was here about 2 years ago, or almost a year and a half ago, on my last review, and I can say that this particular region was very, very helpful in being engaged and engaging us. The report on civilian oversight of policing was certainly reflective of your input. And so, I'm looking forward again this evening for your continued input and your thoughtfulness in addressing some of these issues. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Prasanna Ranganathan. I'm legal counsel to Justice Tulloch on the Independent Street Checks Review. Bonsoir tout le monde. Mon nom est Prasanna Ranganathan et je suis avocat pour l'honorable juge Michael Tulloch. Il y a des écouteurs pour les personnes qui ont besoin de la traduction en français. C'est à l'arrière de la salle. Notre interprète extraordinaire aujourd'hui, c'est Violaine. Donc, elle est dans la boîte ici. Si vous avez besoin de ces écouteurs, utilisez les écouteurs à l'arrière de la salle. Good evening, everyone. As I mentioned, if you're in need of interpretation equipment for simultaneous interpretation in French, please feel free to use the headsets at the back of the room. They also help amplify the sound in the microphones, so if you require them for ease of hearing, they're also available for that purpose, so we encourage you to use them. So I won't keep you much longer before you start your group discussions. Justice Tulloch has already outlined the purpose of the regulation and the review that we'll be undertaking across the province. This is one of 12 public consultations. This is actually number 8. We have 4 more after this. And the next 4 actually are in Windsor, London, Ottawa, and Sudbury. So that is... This slide here refers to the community surveys. So in addition to these public consultations and community meetings and outreach that Justice Tulloch outlined, we also have community surveys on our website, which is streetchecksreview.ca. This pop-up will come up immediately upon visiting the website, and we would encourage you to fill out the survey, which asks you questions about your interactions in the context of street checks, also known as carding. We'd also encourage you to share the survey with your friends and relatives so that they can provide feedback as well. The widest cross-section possible of information will help Justice Tulloch as he undertakes the review of the material presented and makes recommendations. So as we mentioned, the goal of today's meeting is to gather views on street checks in order to determine 3 things. First, whether the practice is still ongoing, the impact of the practice on individuals and communities, and the effect and impact of the new regulation on police-public interactions and public safety. The review is not actually meant, the purpose of tonight's discussions are not actually meant to address individual cases or individual experiences with street checks or carding. While we encourage you to explore these individual experiences at your tables during the breakout discussions, the review is not a place that we can address individual cases or answer specific questions. The purpose of tonight is to gather your views on the practice so that they can inform us going forward in the development of recommendations. The agenda tonight is threefold, so as soon as I get off the stage and you can begin your work, we will move into the roundtable discussion portion of the evening. That will last from about now, I would say, until 7:30. You will notice on your table that there are 3 documents at each place sitting. One is the engagement guide, which outlines the terms of reference for the review, has a brief snapshot of what the regulation is about, and includes the discussion questions. There's a separate sheet that's just called the public consultation questionnaire, and then the third document is a copy of the regulation. Now, the public consultation questionnaire has 20 questions on it. The questions are meant to guide your discussions. They're organized under topic headings, and that's just meant to help you go through them, talk about them as a table. You're not required to answer every question. You may feel that certain questions you don't have particular issues that you want to raise or things you want to discuss, but they're meant to guide you through it. So feel free to use them as a way to guide your conversations. Now, we would encourage you at each of your tables to have one person who will take notes. There's notepads on the table with pens for everyone, but we would encourage you to designate one person to take notes and then one person to report back to the group. So once the roundtable portion of the evening is done, we will come back into a big session where at each table, one person will be asked to present a summary of the discussion of their group. Each table will be given about 5 minutes to present a summary of the discussion. So you'll want to highlight major themes, major points, any recommendations you have in that 5 minutes. So please take detailed notes. At the end of the night, if you feel like you haven't said everything that was on your notepad, we will be collecting all of the notes and be sure that they will be filed and kept appropriately so that we can consider the full spectrum of what you've included. And so in addition, this is the last slide, we're on social media. So these are all of our various social handles, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram primarily being the one. Streetchecksreview.ca is our website, and the email address is at the bottom. If there are things you would like the review to know about your experiences with street checks or carding, your views on the regulation, its impact, or any recommendations that you have from your experiences, feel free to email us at info@streetchecksreview.ca with that information, and we'll be sure that that's compiled and considered in the development of the report. Finally, you will notice that myself and a few of my colleagues will be around the room taking photos and live tweeting the event. We are live right now on Facebook Live. The camera's at the back with Dylan. He's just waving there. And so if you would like not to be on screen, that's totally fine. Just note where the camera is and sort of step out of the view of it. The other option is if you see me taking photos on my phone, it is for Instagram or Twitter. If you don't want to be in the photo in any capacity, just tell me and I'll move along. No problem at all. It's not an issue. So with that, I will encourage you to get into groups. If there are people at tables where there's only 1 or 2 people, I'd encourage you to join a table that has a few seats. The more of you that are at the table, I think it'll be more vibrant and interesting discussions. Again, figure out who your note taker is, go through the questions, and we will come back at 7:30 for a report back. Thank you so much. Sorry, and the last thing I want to highlight is that you will notice we are taking notes, and Justice Tulloch will be taking detailed notes during the report back. We won't be attributing them to anyone in particular. They will just be general comments, so you do not have to worry if you would like your comments to remain anonymous. Thank you.
You don't have to go question by question, so you don't have to read the question. Just give us your feedback on which the main points your groups want to report back and discuss. So it's a summary of your table's discussions. So as the first group goes and we move to the next tables, if they've made a point, you don't have to repeat it. Add your new points as the discussion goes.
Okay, so can you guys hear me? Okay, so within our group, we looked at some of the questions. We were explaining our own experiences. So what we came up with, for example, some of us have experienced carding directly and also through the experiences of our friends and also the stories that we heard too as well. We also explored the many reasons as to why carding is occurring. And a lot of people had really, really great points here. I wish they could speak to as well with regards to some of the points that they came up with. But my buddy here too as well came up with a really good point in terms of being able to implement, cops should be able to practice a protocol when addressing or when you're interacting with people and when you're stopping them, right? So, for example, police should be able to implement so they should be able to state their badge number or be able to explain the people who they're stopping their rights on the street every time. So like I was saying before, so just being able to implement a strategy where they're able to let the people who they stopped of their badge number or let them know of their rights. Further information to also help the people who are getting stopped too as well. A lot of times what we explained here on our table is that, especially my personal experience, is that the police don't know how to interact with who they're stopping correctly, or, you know, it's very disrespectful. It comes off as it comes off as very threatening, and, you know, that loses trust for people like myself and other people who fits my demographic too as well. And you want to explain that? So yeah.
The biggest consensus that we came to at our table is that there's the power imbalance when there's an interaction with people on the street and police. Because many people don't know their rights, and under this new legislation, they have a right to walk away if they're not being investigated for anything. But the majority of people don't know that. So our table said one of the things that police should do when they're interacting with the public is, if they want to have a conversation, they come up to them and explain why they want to speak to them, identify who they are, and let them know that they don't have to speak to them if they don't want to. So everybody is on a level playing field. They know exactly what they can do and what they can say. And then people can make the decision on if they want to have that conversation with the police. But again, you know, if they've done something incorrect or broken the law, that doesn't apply, and we all realize that. What's the other point?
Is there anything else from the group that you'd like to make
else?
before we pass it on to the second table?
We had lots of things. So I will say that we weren't able to go through the listing as well, as quickly as we thought we might have, or maybe you guys had a thought we maybe would have been able to. But what was really powerful is the fact that our stories are similar yet different, and they just ring true. They ring true. They ring true as a mother, as a Black woman. You know, we grew up with these things, so it's something that impacts us consistently. But as we were saying, and I think one of the biggest takeaways from this is possibly having an SOP, so a standard operating procedure that police have to follow. When you stop somebody, especially somebody of color, because you're going to say all lives matter, but especially when they're of color, then there's a certain way to approach it, because at the end of the day, we all deserve respect. And at the end of the day, even if one thing we talked about, somebody could be having mental health issues. So, you know, how do you approach them? Do you just react because of the way they react to you? Do you have some semblance of empathy within you? And one of the other things we spoke about was maybe the police should be checked, not checked by themselves, but checked. There should be some sort of system. Just like I have to be responsible to tell my son, this is what you need to do when a police stops you. I have to carry that burden. I live with it every single day. It's not like I live with it every other day, kind of once a week. It's every day. And he has to live with that. So the burden now becomes mine. It shouldn't be mine. At the end of the day, it is, but it should not be. The burden should be the police to make sure that they're monitoring their people, having them go through their own some sort of mental, checks, psychology evaluations, also workshops and seminars for empathy. That's important. Because as a people, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to ourselves, keep reinventing ourselves and doing courses and, how do we, under stress, what's the best way to release stress? We all have to do it. So everybody else should do it too, right? Especially when you have power over people, it's important. So those were some of the takeaways that our group, we had a great conversation, but those are some of the takeaways that we took.
Thank you very much. So we're trying to give each table fair time to make a summary of their points. So we're going to ask for about 3 to 5 minutes per table.
Good evening, everyone. Our table focused on a number of issues that relate to us as the public having the information that we need in order to engage in these interactions with police officers and come out of it without being scathed. So one of the key things that we discussed around the table was how would we be aware of our rights and what mechanisms are there in place to get this legislation down to us so that we are aware of what our rights are. That seems to be a problem in this system at present because some of us, as you know, we were looking at what has been implemented since January 1st, and around our table, this was a lot of new knowledge for us. So some of the suggestions that we made was that there has to be some place in the system where this information is mandatorily injected into it so that persons can be aware of what their rights are. Some of the suggestions that we made was maybe this is something that needs to happen at a high school level, especially in certain communities. We were made aware of an example up in Thunder Bay where First Nations children are given cards to carry around in their wallets which inform them of what their rights are when they interact with the police officers. Another thing that we looked at was there are places where when we have to interact on a civil level, like at elections time and so forth, where or even the renewal of a driver's license or renewal of a health card, where the government will send us information, right? And perhaps this type of information needs to be sent out to some communities that are deemed as high target communities when it comes to this type of issue. Another thing that we talked about was what should we expect from police officers when we are engaged in this type of interaction? And here are some of the ideas that we came up with. We said that the police officer should have to give us some form of ID. A number of people around our table have been carded without receiving the receipt. So how do you respond to that? So we're saying that the first step in an interaction is that the police officer gives us their business card in the event that we have to follow up and a receipt was not issued. We should have the right to ask what the reason for the stop is without feeling intimidated. The treatment needs to be consistent, right? If you're a member of a minority community, you shouldn't be treated differently. So what are the code of ethics governing and what are the actions being taken as it relates to training police officers when it comes to racial sensitivity? That is something that we should be aware of. Many of us watch television and we know that some of the injustices in the police system in the United States would not have been uncovered if persons did not have their cameras with them. So it should not be against the law for a person to record their interaction with a police officer if the police officer has nothing to hide. If he's operating and acting above board, then it should be recorded because we have seen how these recordings have made a lot of difference in the lives of certain communities and things that were going on for donkey ages are now coming to light and people are saying, you know what, this has been happening for a long time. It's just now that we have the technology for you to see it. So those interactions we should be able to record those interactions. I'll stop at this last point. What creates accountability as it relates to training? Because this is an issue that came up on the paper. Under the last section on page 1, all police officers in Ontario were required to be trained on the new legislation, etc. Item 13. We're saying training is only effective if there's follow-up and accountability. So I've been trained, but what is there in the system that says I'm following the training that I've been given? And if I'm not following the training, what is the repercussion on my part as a professional police officer? So those are what we would like to add. I'm sure that others will contribute to the dialogue as we go through the evening.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so our table group had similar points that were discussed at the other two groups just now. And I guess what we also talked about was the fact that really this new regulation appears to just be new packaging for old behavior. It's really just a new way of doing the same thing, not much different. And so if the purpose of carding is for police to engage and question in suspicious behavior or potentially criminal behavior, if the way in which we know that our society continues to see black bodies as potentially suspects and criminals, then police are going to do the same thing. So unless the police are going to go through a particular training that disrupts what exists in the larger society that is also enters into the policing, then the behavior is not going to change, right? Because it's twofold. So lots of people are talking about training. However, if the police are doing the training with their own thinking and their own ideology of how they engage in interactions, then again, that is not going to be any different. They're going to continue to do the same things. So there's even a question with regards to the training. And it also presupposes that we are agreeing with the regulation, right? So many of the questions, basically, the notion of the receipt on is saying that we're agreeing with the regulation. So if we're agreeing with the regulation, what's getting the receipt and all those things, it doesn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. The other piece around that piece, that if they're going to still continue with the regulation and so forth, what happens to the information? So if I have been given a receipt, then that means information has been collected about me, correct? So where is that information going? How is that information being used? How long is that information going to be in whatever database? And do I know what it is that that information says about me? Do I get a copy of that information that is in that database? So yes, there may be a receipt, and yes, that's a good thing. However, I want to know what that information is and how that is being used, and what access do I have with regards to that information, and can I challenge what's in there and what it says about me? The other thing is also about this notion of, how police officers behave and so forth, but who's doing the monitoring of the police's behavior and the way in which they're going to be engaging with the public? Because we also know that many of the complaints, they often don't go anywhere. So we talk about, it's great to have cameras and all those kinds of things so we can actually see when police do behave in egregious behavior, but we also know what the outcome of those egregious behaviors are, right? We have camera footage of people getting shot and killed, etc. And what happens to the police? So I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that, but I'm just saying, but even when we do, the outcome of that information is still not used to be able to support the public in ensuring that justice has occurred. And the other piece is just, I think I already talked about the notion of how long the information is used. And the other piece is carding beneficial? And I would say it's not beneficial. If a particular group of people are being overrepresented in the way in which a particular activity is being conducted that's harmful, how can that be beneficial? How can that be beneficial? And we know that the behaviors and the way in which people are experiencing that behavior can be very traumatic and negative. So how can that be beneficial?
Thank you. Next table.
Okay. Good evening. To piggyback on your point, nice to see you, Camille. Who does it benefit, right? Who does carding benefit? And our table spoke to racialized communities being low-hanging fruit. And low-hanging fruit allows a system to benefit from skewing numbers, to build business cases for funding a system that can oppress and intimidate racialized and marginalized communities. Thank you. I would need to see statistics, I am no scholar in this, to see whether or not carding has had a fundamental, reduction in all crime in all demographics of our communities for me to buy into it. Okay, so number two, when we are speaking about, or when I reflect on any relationship, whether it's a marriage or the relationship with my child, if every relationship ended in happily ever after in utopia, there wouldn't be the divorce rates that we have and breakups and single parenthood and whatnot. Same goes to say with the spirit in which I think carding was invented. And so in a utopian society, in a perfect world, carding and the spirit of it would be used to build this relationship where we can communicate and we've got a nice partnership between community and officers of the law. Unfortunately, we are all fallible, including our police officers. Hence, this laundry list of issues and scenarios in which they cannot and should not have been, but still do act upon today. And then there's this out clause, these bunch of out clauses that we noted at the bottom of this material that allows them to say, you know what? I got to run. There's a cat in a tree I've got to run to, so I can't give you your receipt today, sir. I got to go. That's what these out clauses are. I mean, I'm being facetious here, but there's some out clauses here that don't force them to be accountable to this. Education and communication. I think education should start at the elementary school level, quite frankly, if you want to build a culture and a community where police and you can shrink that power dynamic that my brother was speaking about here, because our children, at least my child, was taught by the time he was 9. Guess what, son? At some point, you're going to be stopped by a police officer because of the color of your skin. So we have been teaching our kids in a spirit of fear as opposed to cooperation and that they are there to serve and protect us. And of course, we do need law and order in any society, so we do need them. But we've been coming at this in fear, and in some communities, as one of my colleagues here was saying, you don't want to snitch. And you don't want to cooperate because you don't know what information they're going to store on you at some point and hold against you if they catch you for something else or plant on you. So there are big trust issues. How can you bridge that trust? Maybe this is something that is taught incrementally throughout the life cycle of our students, because if all I'm teaching my kid is how to not get stopped by police because you're black, and how to obey and shut your mouth so that you come home safely to me and don't get shot in the back for having a bag of Skittles in your hand, right? Then we don't build the community that we're looking for here. Right? We don't build cooperation. We don't build the society that the spirit of this was intended for. Okay? This should be, I should know this before today. I should know this without having to listen to boring News Talk 1010 radio and listen to Desmond Cole every now and then speak to it. This should be on our bus shelters. This should be on our TTCs, on our Viva Transit. This should be in my mailbox. This should be on posters at Markville. This should be in the curriculum, okay? And that is how we're going to change generationally. We want to make generational change. I don't want to be pacified with this. Okay, and sorry, because these out clauses really, quite frankly, offended me. I understand why, there's some cute examples of why they might not target me because of my race, but we all know it happens. And again, human nature, and we're also fighting society. It is not just police that look upon us as if we are less than, or as if our lives don't matter. I look at the media, I look at fashion magazines, I look at what I see in television. We have a society all around the globe that is, so it's no wonder that the people in power have this similar mindset and use the controls and the power dynamic to affect our communities the way they have.
Thank you. Table 5.
So I have to say that after the sister spoke, we don't have much to say. It seems as though you're eavesdropping on our table, like everything, you just nailed it. So I'll try to find some of the things that weren't said, very little, but I'll try. I think, you said that about black youths, about skin color, you said that. Wow. Accountability, you said that. Whoa. I'm trying to find some space here. Okay, so one of the things that we noted on this table is that there are places in the world like England, France, Japan, those places where police have interaction with people, because we went to this whole thing about targeting vulnerable groups, and we spoke about people with mental health issues, and we noted that there are places where police do not need guns to interact with them and solve those problems. So we think one of the problems too, when we talk about carding, is that we should be disarming the police. Like in certain jurisdictions, like in England, I understand that the police, to carry guns, you would have to have some sort of special authorization. So, if you have a situation where you need a gun, you get authorized to use the gun. I think we need to have that in place. The other thing about it is that we can talk about training until next year. It's not going to work unless we have accountability. And I'm saying, even though you charge $20 for every mistake, so the guy he knows, okay, I just gave away $20. I think he'll think, another pizza? No. Okay. Charge them something. Make them have some sort of mindfulness of their action, because it seems as though it's just like a go-through for them. There's nothing to worry about. So why bother? You know what I mean? We talk about the anti-bias training. Those things are good things, but without accountability, without some sort of something to keep you aware and mindful, it's just going to be a joke, and our lives are not a joke. Now, another thing we are talking about is another reason why we shouldn't have carding, because there are cases, and I have witnessed those things by myself. As a matter of fact, my interaction with police came about because of my involvement helping black youths in Jane and Finch, right? During my summer, when I have vacation, I go to help the kids, play games with them, read with them, do things with them, right? It started off in C.W. Jeffries. There was a program I used to volunteer in. And then summer comes along, and then kids don't have anything to do. And then, I find myself, we're doing things. And I had kids growing up, and I would bring my kids too, and we get involved. And I have witnessed cops interacting with 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and stepping on their feet. And that's how you get the reaction, because if you step on a teenager's foot, it's going to push you off, right? And that's where the assault charge comes in. Right? So there are a lot of things we need to look at, right? But if we are serious, if you're really serious, we're not going to have any carding, because that's where the problem. That is it, okay? You can't make this be pretty. You can put all kind of lipstick and stuff like that. It's still going to be whatever it is, okay? And I don't want to be disrespectful to that three-letter animal, because I think sometimes, let's not even go there. Okay, let me see if I find one more thing that you didn't say. Oh my goodness. No, I would say well said. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is that it for the, oh, that's it? Oh, we have a gentleman in the middle, if we could get the mic back.
I have 3 minutes. Okay, I have 3 minutes. So real quick,
Okay.
there's obviously an epidemic going around of police officers abusing their power, and you never know who's going to do it until it's already done. So I've always said for the longest time that if we took all the different police officers that have done something that they shouldn't have done and gone and look at their entry tests into the academy and then found the common denominator in every single one of those persons' tests and then use that as a guide of people to not hire as policemen. Just something to think about. They don't have, do they have that test? I'm pretty sure they don't. They keep track. Another thing I was going to say is turquoise lives matter. What does that make you think of? I say turquoise lives matter. What does that make you think of? Do you take me seriously? Turquoise lives matter? You don't take me seriously, right? Turquoise, the color turquoise, right? So you guys are like, what? Turquoise. Yeah, no, it's a color. It's turquoise. Damn it, it's turquoise. Turquoise. Okay, so where's the country black? Where's the country Blackistan? Okay, we're all here talking about you have to know the law, know the law. One of the things that we have to do as well is knowing knowledge of self. There's no country called black. When you look up black in law, it means nothing. So we're here identifying, saying Black Lives Matter. Look, my shirt is black. Not one person in here is the color of my shirt. Statistically, yeah, there might be a few people on this planet with skin this color, but they don't call themselves black and they don't identify with a country called black. When you identify with a color instead of a country, you're waiving your rights. Why do you think Michael Jackson said, I'm not going to spend my life being a color? Think about that. Good night.
So I want to thank you, first of all, for your comments and sharing your stories at your table and reporting them back. We will take your written comments. Again, I'm going to refer you to our social media accounts and our website. If there's anything further you wish to add to the discussion or the dialogues tonight, there are different ways that you can contact us to follow up and provide those comments. Before we close for the evening, I'm going to let Justice Tulloch make some final closing remarks.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, I want to thank you again, Joe Len, and thanks to each and every one of you that are here this evening, each of you that have participated in this discussion. Like I said before, it's very, very important to us to have your views. I can indicate that I listened very carefully and I made notation of each and everything, each and every point that you have made. And, you know, your comments and your thoughtfulness and your insights will definitely be reflected upon by myself. And it will definitely inform the ultimate report that we put together at the end of this consultation process. So again, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. I know it's a sacrifice of your evening, but these are important issues, and I think it's also a part of the public education process, right? And I think that is critically important because one of the salient things that we realize throughout this process is the lack of knowledge of this regulation. And we talk about CARD-N, but not very many people actually understand what the issues are surrounding CARD-N or these particular regulations. And so I think it's important for us to engage in this discussion for us to understand these issues and for you to understand what your rights are, right? Because unless you understand what your rights are, then, you know, like one of the persons says, you can't have any real accountability, or we can't be truly responsible in making sure that the police respect our rights, right? So I think this entire process is important. And so I commend each and every one of you for coming out and for taking the time to sit and seriously go through these processes. The system is not perfect, right? But unless we as people, as citizens, engage in this process, then you're never going to change it. And that's the reality. And these issues are not new. They've been going on for a very long time. And frankly, you know what, the law is also there, and the regulation is to a large extent a codification of what the law is. But before this regulation, we know that police periodically and systematically would engage in a practice of arbitrarily stopping and questioning people without people understanding what their rights are. And even some of the police themselves didn't understand what their limitations were. So I think that this is critically important. And so I encourage you to continue this engagement as, you know, as I continue to do the work that I do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're just going to ask you to leave anything that you would want us to pick up, your notes, leave them on the center of your table, and we will collect them as we continue to clean up. Thank you very much. Safe travels home. Good night, everyone.